This morning, we're heading into day 3 of the government shutdown. A shutdown coming just as the U.S. president passes the one-year mark in office. And in that time, there have been numerous books grabbing attention and headlines. This morning, a new one joins the list, this one looking at leadership, not personality. Trumpocracy is written by journalist David Frum, a man who spent time in the White House as a speechwriter for George W. Bush. And David Frum joins us here in studio this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's talk about the shutdown, because it's looming. Well, it's not looming. It's ever present. Both parties blaming each other. Trump on Twitter threatening what he calls the nuclear option.
Yeah.
What does this tell you about his leadership?
Well, Donald Trump wanted this shutdown because he thrives on chaos. He is not someone who understands the normal democratic mechanisms of government. He's always believed if you create a scene, if you pull the fire alarm, then you can grab anything that isn't nailed down. and that's been his method. So he's hoping to do better out of chaos than he would out of regular government.
But as the deal maker in chief, this is what the American people were sold. This doesn't hurt his brand?
Donald Trump's brand has never been making deals. Trump's brand has been bullying and stealing. He is the least bankable name in New York real estate. No one in the business world ever took seriously the idea of Donald Trump as a great businessman. What has happened as he's come into power is he's gained impunity for a lot of things that are really shocking. For example, right now, Donald Trump is receiving millions of dollars, we don't know how many, maybe tens of millions of dollars in payments from foreign partners in places like the Philippines and Turkey. These are people who are under the control of their own government. They write him checks, and he is just completely ignoring half a century of understanding that the president's first not supposed to do these things, and second is supposed to tell people if he does.
You say that he operates by instinct and not strategy.
Yeah.
And that his greatest skill is sniffing out the weaknesses of his opponents. Yes. And in doing so, he's been able to sort of press at the weak points in the American political system.
Right.
So what have we learned about this political system through his ascension to the presidency?
What he understood was that Americans hate each other these days more than they care about protecting their common system. There are a lot of things that he's doing that in times past, everybody would have agreed. Look, you can't just fire the head of the FBI because he's investigating your friends. You can't do that. And Republicans and Democrats alike would have said that. You can't take millions of dollars in shady payments and not publish where you're getting your money from. And Republicans and Democrats would have agreed. What Trump understood was the animosity between the parties and the different areas of American life is so great that if one group attacks you, you can rally the other group to defend you. And his even bigger instinct is as the parties more and more divide along racial lines, that being racially provocative, instead of being a career ender, can be a career maker.
You know, when looking at this president and his power, how he got there, how he's keeping this power, you're also looking at the people who have, and you use the word, enabled him.
Yes.
Because it's not a one-man show. As much as,
exactly.
The spotlight is on Donald Trump, he keeps that power because of a lot of the people around him. Who are these people that you say enable him?
Well, the most important and immediate enablers are the Republicans in Congress. The idea was always that Congress would check the president, the famous checks and balances, but they've got a deal where Congress wants to do, the Republicans in Congress want to do very unpopular things. No normal president, George W. Bush would never have signed these things because they're unpopular. He wants to get reelected. Donald Trump will sign unpopular things like this latest tax cut that does very little for most people and a lot for very few, if in turn the Republicans in Congress will protect him and give him impunity from his own wrongdoing. Signatures for impunity. So that's the first step of enablement. Then the larger party in the country, they enable him because they have become so angry at a country that is changing, that is becoming younger, that is becoming darker, and they are so losing faith in democracy that this authoritarian president seems to them their last chance.
What about this Republican Party? You know, depending on where you read, what sources that you pick from, some people say that the country is changing to the point that the Republican Party can't keep up, can't represent what the country is eventually going to become. But you say, sullied as it is by Trump, the Republican Party will outlast him. What will this GOP look like in the future? What will they stand for? And who's going to support it?
Well, the Republicans are coming to a fateful choice. The path they're on right now, and the path I'm trying to pull them away from, is to say, right, our ideas can't win in this new country, but if we could somehow knock off 10 or 12 or 14% of the voters, you know, through things at the state level that no one understands, changing the rules. We can disenfranchise just enough people that we'll remain competitive. And that is what has happened in states like Wisconsin and North Carolina. What I am hoping is that Republicans can understand democracies need stable democratic parties of the center-right that stand up for private enterprise, that stand up for low taxes. And you see successful parties like that in Canada, in Britain, in Germany. It can be done, and to become more of a normal rather than extreme party of the center-right.
Last week on this show, we spoke with Anthony Scaramucci.
Yes.
And I want to throw you to a clip about how he talked about this president and the future of a Trump administration. Let's take a look.
He's got great political instincts, and my guess is he's going to adapt and pivot like a very good entrepreneur over the next 36 months, and he's going to win re-election.
So he's got... All right, so there's a prediction for you.
Yeah.
What do you think of it?
Well, what I think is interesting is that people around Donald Trump kiss up to him in a way that nobody who worked for George W. Bush would ever do, or no one who worked for Barack Obama would do. It's just embarrassing because, you know, your guy doesn't need that much kissing up and doesn't want it and doesn't trust people who do it. But there's what Donald Trump does to everybody in his orbit. He turns them into mini Trumps. And one of the things I talk about in the book is how people of really honorable backgrounds go to work for him and they turn into liars, they turn into crooks. It's just terrible, the effect he has, because the government as a whole comes to take on the character of the president.
You know, something that just occurred to me, how have your personal relationships within the conservative movement, within the GOP, been affected by your attacks on Donald Trump?
Well, there's an old saying in Washington that if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. I have 2 dogs.
I got to ask, you know, we've been talking about this. It'd be very easy to have a negative outlook based on reading Trumpocracy. And yet, at one point, your last chapter, there's a 4-letter word. It's called hope.
Yes.
And you talk about the unexpected consequence of having this man as our president, that he has given us the gift of wider vision. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is Donald Trump talked about a lot of things that no one else would talk about. The opioid epidemic, that was entirely ignored, shockingly, and I detailed that in 2015. He talked about it. He doesn't do anything about it. He understood the stresses of immigration and how when 2016 saw the highest level of immigration in American history, tied only with 1998. That leads to strains. What he saw as large numbers of Americans felt the political system didn't work for them at all, so much so they're prepared to consider an anti-democratic alternative. So that is news that we need to absorb. What he's also done, as we saw with the Women's March this weekend, is triggered a level of civic engagement, unlike anything I've seen in my career in media and government. Anyone who writes for a living notices people are reading in a way they never have before, as if it really mattered, because it does really matter.
You know, there are a lot of books out there about this presidency, but if people want to read one that's got sizzle and steak to it, well thought out in its critique, I highly recommend Trumpocracy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David Frum, for being here this morning.
Thanks for having me.